Thank you for watching the You Didn't.
Hi, welcome to You Didn't Get the Memo. I'm your host, Gloria Bailey Ray, and as always, we have an exciting show for you today. Look, in fact, we're going to infuse some comedy into our show today, and I'm excited to have my guests. But first of all, let me just welcome all of you to You Didn't Get the Memo. I'm your host, Gloria Bailey Ray. And if you have comments or questions, this is an interactive show, and I love that. You can place them in the comment sections, and we'll do our very best to respond to you. Now, you didn't get the memo. At the end of the day, it's truly all about providing you, the viewer, with relevant, factual, mainstream information to help you be informed and to make informed decisions. Our show today is being brought to you by Crispy. And I want to tell you that my guest, Mr. Chris Tabish, he is the founder of Comediology. I cannot talk today. Comediology Company. He's a published author and of the book Comediology. Now, he talks about how to be more effective and fulfilled in business with comedy, and he is a public speaker. By the way, I want to let all of you guys know that we're going to be giving away 4 tickets to Chris's show in San Francisco. And Chris will confirm this. I think the date is December the 19th. So confirm that for sure. But without further ado, I want to welcome to the show Mr. Chris Tabish. Chris, holla. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Gloria. I think there's some confusion. I was here for the tax audit. No, just thank you. It is so great to be here. Thank you for having me on the show, Gloria. I'm super excited. So thank you again.
Oh, wow. I mean, the fact that I think towards the end of the year, we could all use some humor, right? It's been a crazy year with COVID. And I don't know about you, but at this point right now, I am just overwhelmed with all of the talk. I can't turn on a channel without it talking about now there's a variant here and a variant there and this and this. And so I just thought this would be awesome for us to be able to have someone on the show and infuse some humor while we're also educating our viewers about what it is that you do, Chris, with the Comediology Company. So, and you heard me say it was a tongue twister there for a moment. I'm like, blah, 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 blah,
blah. When I invent words, I try to make them as complicated as possible. That's my gift in life. So.
Okay, well, you mission accomplished. All right, so look, let's just jump right in. Let's kind of level set a little bit for our viewers. I'm going to ask you to tell the viewers about your backstory, you know, where you grew up and how you got into comedy. So
yeah.
I'm
okay.
You.
Well, from a comedian perspective, I was early identified in the womb. So they said this is going to be a comedian, and away we go. No, I've always, so I'm originally from Utah, which, you know, there's enough of my material to get on stage, you know, period. But I actually was a very left-brained individual, I would say, growing up. I had a lot of dysfunction early on, which always helps to look on the bright side of the comedic side. It wasn't until I got later into life, until I thought that I had the things that I had always wanted, or I had the things that I thought I always wanted. I had a well-paying job. I had, you know, I had a good savings account. I had a family. I had some Rice Krispie treats hidden away in the. But the point is, I thought that had what I thought that I wanted, and then I realized this really isn't bringing me joy. I mean, it's getting me by, but the joie de vivre, that joy of life. And so I've always loved comedy, but it's a little bit daunting to get into. So I started taking a class. I realized that I rediscovered joy in my life. It was a blast. I had fun. I started getting out on stage a little bit more. And not only was I rediscovering joy, but I was also becoming more effective at what I did. So I kind of had the best of both worlds. I was doing stand-up comedy, and I was kind of tracking these notes about what are those things in comedy that people kind of overlook? Maybe they'll never be a comedian, but are super effective for bringing into the work life. And so I started writing those down, which ended up being comediology. And so I was able to kind of do that as well as continue my job, which, who doesn't like getting paid? So
Right.
that's good.
And the beauty of it and what you're talking about, yeah, I think that we both can agree. In my case, you get up, and I don't know about you. I didn't grow up in Utah, but I did grow up in the South. And one of the things is get a good job, work hard, take care of your family, and those types of things that are ingrained in you. But again, like you said, you're just going to a job, doing a job, but it's not fulfilling you. It's not giving you
Yeah.
what it is that you want. So that's the other reason of being able to speak with you, because it's exciting to hear someone else say, look, I found joy in doing something else. And the unfortunate thing for a lot of people who are probably watching the show today, they have just kind of been stuck in a rut, and this is all that they thought they could do. And this is why talking to you about how you found joy in doing comedy.
Yeah.
You know what? You found life. That's basically what it is. You found your life in your voice.
Yeah, and the beautiful thing is that everybody has access to it, but it's often overlooked. We kind of go to work or do whatever we're going to do during the day, and then we watch, Netflix at night. Okay, that's funny. But the thing that I love about comedy, my most favorite thing, is that when I was in corporate America, when I was miserable, I would often look outside of myself for validation, right? So if it was, hey, we want you to do some sort of analysis, I would look at what the industry says, or what what my boss thinks, or what the benchmark is, and I would forget the most important aspect, which is me. And as ridiculous as that sounds, comedy taught me to have a point of view. It's crazy, and I don't know. I'm thinking a lot of other people might be this way as well. When I first got up on stage, and when you do comedy, you can't get up there and grab the microphone and say, hey, what the guy before me said. You know what I'm saying? Like, you need to bring what do you think? What you think is funny, what you think is awkward, and you need to talk about that. And that's when you're a comedian telling it. I think
Right.
the beautiful thing is that even when we hear a joke, and you brought this up earlier, Gloria. This is one of my favorite jokes that actually kids do things that happen in real life that are funny. But my daughter comes up to me when she was younger, and she goes, Daddy, I love cats. And sometimes, Daddy, I wish you were a cat. And I was like, well, why do you wish Daddy was a cat? And she goes, because then I'd have a cat. So there's a joke. Maybe you laugh, maybe you didn't. Glad I spent so much time into being a father when I just scratch the litter box and tear up the curtains. But maybe you laugh, maybe you didn't. But the point is, you didn't need to look at anybody else to say, was that funny? It's that voice inside of us that tells us something that is funny. It's the same voice that knows if what you're doing at work is the right thing for you, if the
Right.
person's going to be a good hire, if you feel good about the work product that you've just completed. It's that voice inside of us that we kind of overlook.
Right. Absolutely. And the unfortunate part is, in corporate America, people tend to just push that aside. And that's why I thought it was really interesting, because you actually come into the workforce and you're working with these powers to be and their employees, and bringing something, and I think adding an element that maybe a lot of people hadn't thought about. And you're right. At the end of the day, you either look at the glass as half full or half empty, but you got to find, where's the fun of this? What's the fun of this?
Yeah.
I mean, think about factory workers, right? And what are they doing? Some of them are just doing things that rote memorization, same thing over and over and over. And you got to stop and say, now what the heck?
Yeah.
And when you talk to people, they say, I've done this for 35, 40 years. And for me, I'm sitting there saying, who does this for 40 years? Right?
Yeah.
But again, you've got to be able to laugh and find, where's the humor in all of this? And so with that, Chris, you said you went to a school, because I wanted to ask you about how long have you been doing comedy? And, you talked a little bit about how you got into it, but the thing is your passion, because you got to have a passion for doing comedy.
Gotta have a passion.
You're
Yeah.
going to get into being, doing stand-up comedy, and look, ain't nobody laughing, right? Or people are just kind of like, I didn't get that. And I'm one of those, I'm like, I didn't get that. See, I got the thing about the cat joke with kids because I have grandkids and kids, and they're wishing things. Yeah, my son, do you know what the wingspan of an eagle is? And I'm thinking, what the dick is the wingspan of an eagle? And I'm trying to figure out where our next meal is going to come from, right? So, but out of the mouths of babes and children for sure. So tell us a little bit about how long have you really been doing comedy? I mean,
Yeah.
what's the whole shebang there?
So I've been doing comedy. I mean, I've always loved making people laugh. Like if I look inside myself, I always found joy connecting with people and just watching them smile. It just brings me joy. But I took my first stand-up class. This was in 1999, I think. But then I really earnestly started doing stand-up comedy for real, though, in 2009. So I guess that's about 12 years where I've really been doing it, week in, week out on a regular basis.
So with that, Chris, how would you describe the type of comedy that you do?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it really that's part of being a comedian. By the way, Gloria, just to kind of talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, sure.
It's finding everybody's got a different sort of flavor. And you used to think comedy, and that's like, hey, I want to be a comedian. But then if you look at all the famous comedians, say Robin Williams versus Richard Pryor versus Sam Kinison, very different people, and it's their sort of heart and soul they're bringing to the stage. I think if I look at where I bring my heart and soul, it's being a father. I mean, I love my kids, but oh my gosh, the crazy stories that they have. A lot of my humor actually comes from my kids, observational humor. When we were doing the Zoom class, for example, my son, it was his first day of school, so he was 8 years old at the time, and big Zoom class, everybody's in there. He's looking at the teacher. The teacher comes on and he's like, hey, everybody, you can tell I sound a little bit different, right? And he goes, does anybody know where I'm from? And he looks around the class and finally he points to my son and he goes, you Dad, can you tell where I'm from? And my son looks at him and he goes, Geico? So these true stories that I don't need to make stuff up. I mean, obviously I do. Then I add on to that, or just weird things that happen in my life. But as being probably a suburban dad, living this crazy life and just bringing those, I would say, hyper focusing on the crazy stuff in my life, if I had to say.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely. And wherever you can draw that from, because the people that you talked about, oh my gosh, I mean, you named some of my favorite, comedians. And I think Sam Kinison, he was out of control.
He was
he was real out of control, but just help you, laughing. And then Richard Pryor, I mean, what can you say? We still laugh about, Richard Pryor and that monkey's foot. It's all of those things. So having that and knowing that you can draw on that. And I applaud you for saying, hey, look, let me step. I know it's something more to it than, this 9 to 5, this corporate, this, the same thing. I mean, even with the meetings you go to and your eyes are rolling back in your head as these guys are droning on and on. And I say they're posturing, for themselves. It's crazy. So to hear that you were able to make that transition, and my goal is again, providing our viewers with information so that there may be somebody out there that's saying, you know what, I'm actually really funny, no matter what it is, and you find the humor in that. And that's why we do what we do, for sure. So when we come back, Chris, let's talk about the role that comedy can or does play in a cynical world. Because I want to talk about, is there a need for us to preserve the culture of comedy something that you don't hear and see a whole lot right now about. So we'll be right back. You guys don't go anywhere. And if you have questions, make sure that you put them in the comment section. Thank you guys for tuning in.
Why don't you ever see elephants hiding in trees? Because they're really good at it. Yeah, I get it.
Roll over. When you adopt a shelter pet, you discover all the things that make them unique. And your mother. They're a little bit of a lot of things. They're all pure love.
All right. If you guys are just tuning in to You Didn't Get the Memo, my guest is Mr. Chris Tabish of Comediology. And Chris is talking with us about his rise to becoming a comedian. And also, and I'm listening to that phone.
That's my agent calling. I said, listen, call right in the middle of the interview. That's what would really help me out.
So, Chris, before we went to break, one of the things we talked about, the role that comedy can or that it does play in a cynical world. Because right now, I think that we're just living in some very, very different times. So what's your take on comedy and what that role should, would, could look like in this world as we know it right now?
Well, I think first off, we would need to find a cynical world upon which to, use the comedy. I think, Gloria, I think it's a great question. I think, what comedy does for me, it kind of, and you know this, right? When you've been watching too much news, or when you're reading too many articles, or when you're inside and you're kind of locked down, you get inside of your head, and in particular, probably your left brain, and you're analyzing things, and you're just going over on things. This same thing happens in a meeting, by the way. What's beautiful about comedy is, okay, so when you went to commercial, the joke was, why can you never see elephants hiding in trees? Because they're really good at it. Now, it's a funny joke. I like that. It makes me laugh. But here's the great thing. Starting with comedy, even if you just a small chuckle, okay, what happens is it moves your body. It makes you aware that, oh, this isn't just me in my amygdala. I actually have a body. And the crazy thing is your body has so much intelligence to it. So whether you talk about heart rate or lung capacity or brain synapses, you consciously couldn't keep your body alive for like 30 seconds. When you laugh at a joke, it relaxes your body. It realizes, and there's a certain wisdom to it. And as crazy as that sounds, when we're in our bodies, that's when we're able to connect with other people. Sorry, will you want to get in, Gloria? I see you poof up here, and you're like, I want to get on some of this.
No. I mean, I'm like, hey, I'm all in. I got it.
Yeah, and it's crazy. So we have our and even in meetings, like the power of an opener. So
Yes.
Comedians use openers, right? And you think, oh, it's just something nice to start off to get people laughing. Yeah, you know this, Gloria. The crazy thing is we all have different thoughts. So, you came on like, I want to have a great show today when we started the call. I came on like, the powder on my nose just does not look good. And, but I do have a widow's peak that's to die for.
Right.
But we all have different thoughts, but and when you come into a meeting, people try to cram everybody onto the same page of thought.
Right.
But an opener, it gets us to our emotion. All of a sudden, it's so much easier if we're laughing, we're on the same page, we're on the same emotional level. Thoughts can follow from there. And it's so much easier. It's a downhill. So when you talk about using comedy in a world, I mean, just talking about connection, talking about being aligned, because heaven knows this is not an aligned world right now.
Right.
And we're not aligned on thoughts, but let's start with the emotion. From there, it's much easier.
Yeah, absolutely. So the need to preserve the comedy, and thank you for saying that, because a lot of people will just get on stage and they'll just start talking, right? They've not really checked out the audience. You know, you got to
Yeah.
have a feel for the audience,
Right.
right? And when you don't know, and depending on the different people, you have to be so very careful. And that's the one thing I think for me that's really important when a comedian is actually able to connect with and has surveyed their audience and say, oh, okay, they seem like a serious crowd. They seem like a crowd that's over here. You got 4, 5, 10 tables. People are laughing. It seems like they're having fun. It's I think that same thing happens in the real corporate world too, and even more so now with Zoom. Everybody's gone to, we're online, and just the craziness that kind of comes along with it. So hearing you talk about the importance of having good openers, that right there is, that's one for me to, make sure that I tuck away as well.
You've got
So
the fireplace, Gloria. You're on fire. What do you look
look,
at
it's cold, right? It's
that?
cold. So I want to make sure that the viewers say, oh, okay, in a relaxing environment. And that's what it is. And by the way, I'm an accomplished pianist as well.
Yeah.
So,
I love it. Yeah, and one of the things, so I love what you just said right there, because you talk about comedy and knowing the audience and how you can really off-put people, especially today. Everything is off limits. But the one thing that isn't off limits is yourself, right?
Mhm.
You can always make fun of yourself. And people and it's open hunting season, not to the point of hurting your credibility, but like who doesn't like calling it the way that it is when it's yourself and everything. People, I think a lot of times we don't realize how we come across. Like Gloria, when I look at you, it's like, oh my gosh, you've got it made. You're beautiful. You've got like a great hat. You've got like this, like like wardrobe. Like you're matching. Look at me. I've got a blue shirt. Like who am I? I probably should have shaved that before I started. But people can take that as a threat, especially in corporate situation or in,
Yes.
but if
Yes.
we sort of make fun of ourselves, have a jab at ourselves, it's like, I can connect with this person. They're not perfect. Neither am I. Let's
Right.
connect. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. In fact, I was listening to some of your snippets, and one of the things that's
That
really
sounded painful. Oh,
listen, and the one about oh wow, I need to get some new pajamas. We
Yeah.
won't finish the rest of it, but look at what happened. A lot of people could relate to that because there were people on Zoom and they weren't aware that you could only see not only the upper, they go to stand up, or the woman who, how many times have I seen on Facebook, the woman who goes to the bathroom, right?
Yeah. Right.
And she's on a Zoom call. And I mean, those are crazy things, but it happens. And you got to either be able to laugh about it, or you can sit there and say, oh my God, what happened? And I just think that's so critically important. If you can't laugh at yourself, then really and truly, that's what life is really about.
Yeah.
And some days I laugh so hard. My husband said, oh, so you talking to yourself again? Yes, I am. And that's the beauty. That's the beauty of it. So I just appreciate having you pull that out and talk more about that. And so for all of you guys that are in corporate America, or you're looking for something else, you want to bring something different, this is why we're talking to Chris Tabish of Comediology, because he's bringing something different. And at the same time, I'm just telling you, he's level setting a lot of the things that people, they really want to talk about. But see, Chris is on it, and he can do it in such an eloquent way that
That I'm the one that gets fired. Thanks for that.
Right.
He's expendable. Let's go.
After you cash the check, right? So,
Hey, am I getting paid for this? No, I'm just
Yeah.
kidding.
Look, that's the thing. So those are interesting, and I want to thank our viewers who tuned in. Thank you, Sister Jackie. She's loving this. She's on Facebook Live.
Thanks, Jackie.
Yeah, and here's the thing for all of you guys, and Chris, I don't know if I shared that with you. The show airs, we're national and international. We're on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, but we're all over the world, and that's the beauty of it. So,
Okay,
you
but
know,
Gloria, are you on MySpace? Or am I
look,
wasting my time here?
you're wasting your time.
We need to get to the VHS rollout
Look,
ASAP.
it's
Okay.
MySpace. I'm like, okay, I'm not there yet for sure. But look, let me just ask you this. Let's transition and let's tell our viewers about your company, Comediology. And I've been putting up Chris's information. But Chris, talk about Comediology. What's that about? Folks working for you or folks, all comedians. I mean, tell us what Comediology is.
No, that's it. It's folks working for me. Any questions? No. So Comediology is about taking those principles of comedy and applying them to corporate life. So what we typically do is come into, it could be an offsite where we just come in and talk about comedy and applying those principles. It can be a working session. We just finished up, in fact, in November, a 3-day offsite where we worked with a company. They just wanted a fun offsite. So what we did is they wanted to make it like a Saturday Night Live weekend update, right? So we wrote a bunch of scripts. We got a bunch of graphics, and they actually came up with the content. So our job is to make them funny with company content. So they're talking about things, giving out crazy awards. They have their, every company has core values. This is their non-core value awards. We did a Comediology session, but it's just, and then we had a session about how to write a joke, but different goofy, funny things where they can not only have fun, but also learn. So some of the things, for example, we might come in and talk to them about are an application, a lesson from the comedy stage. And I see this, Gloria. I will see people who start comedy and they'll think, as we were talking about before, it's comedy. And I just want to do comedy. I just want to tell jokes. And what I find is that typically people fall into 4 different categories. And it's true not only in comedy, but also in business. So let's take the one is called a writer. So it's pretty basic in its description, right? It's like people who tend to be more introverted. They tend to come up with really witty insights because they're in touch with that creative part of their brain that they just write. And if you told them to write a script, they would be able to do it very quickly, very efficiently. They wouldn't be intimidated, and they would, oh my gosh, this is amazing. David Sedaris, by the way, if you know who that is, he's an author, very funny author. When he gets up on stage, he just reads his material. He doesn't even, that's his performance. So if you typically told a writer they're going to be up on stage, and this is, by the way, if you know you're a writer, they're like, oh my gosh, I do not want to be on stage. It would take them 6 months to get up on stage, to feel they had the material to get up there. Writers are not necessarily going to be the loudest people in the room, but if you lean into what you have, it's an incredible gift. You can come up with insights and write scripts, and it's amazing, but embracing that instead of wanting to be another type. So that's a writer. Another type that there's a performer. So performers, those are just the opposite. You give them a microphone and it's just like you said, Gloria, they're in here talking for a half hour. They're like, wait, what was I talking about? They just love to perform. They love to be the life of the party. Robin Williams was a performer. And if you think about the great bits that Robin Williams has had, typically it's hard to remember one, but you remember his energy. You remember his characters. He came to life. Those are performers. Another type is an engager. So maybe you don't come up with content, creative content. Maybe you don't like to perform, but what an engager does, and Gloria, I just don't know where I could find an engager in this conversation. So Gloria, you are a quintessential engager. Obviously, you love to engage people. That's what your magic is is bringing out other people's magic. So my guess is with me, you're like, hey, Chris, let us hear about your magic, whether it be one person or whether it be a group. You are like a symphony conductor and you can bring out all this magic. And so you've seen people on stage, they can like engage with the people. Likewise with corporate America, like if you can be at a table and bring out everybody's magic, what a gift. But embrace that as your gift. Don't try to be up there performing. Don't try to be out there writing. And if you are, and in corporate America, for example, if you're coming to a presentation where you know there's going to be a lot of Q&A, bring an engager. They love that. They love to do that. So you can find that partner and engage with them. The last one I'll just quickly say is the storyteller. So these guys that are just, and you've met these guys, every time you meet them, right? Oh my gosh, I got to talk to you about my neighbor. And you're just enthralled in the story. And it's the funny thing is I talk to these guys and they're always telling stories. And then they get up on the corporate stage and they're like, okay, the statistics from last quarter. And you're like, what? You've got a great story. Use them. So knowing your type, not only you can embrace yourself and stop competing with people, but also figure out how to teammate and just and really bring a powerful product to your company.
Yeah. You're talking about my word, being authentic. Stay in your lane. You don't need to try to be anybody other than who you are. I find it amazing when people think some of the things that I say are funny, but I'm sitting there. I just watched something where someone had posted and they're at this event and the wife is swirling around and she's got white deodorant marks under her arm. And I'm thinking, well, damn, they actually have.
Sorry, guys, she's taken. Okay.
Right. So, and I just started laughing. I'm cracking up at that. My husband said that. I said, yeah, because it's kind of like looking at athletes, right? They got all this hair hanging from under their arms and they're using a white deodorant stick. I mean, really, they didn't get the memo, right? So,
hang on 1 second, Gloria.
Yeah.
Okay, we're good. All right.
Check it out. Let me see. Those armpits. So those are the things, just staying in lane. But it struck me as being really funny. I'm like, if you're going to wear short sleeves and those kinds of things, you might want to check that out a little bit. So
you might want to wear a coat in June. I'm just
right, exactly. Definitely something that covers it. So those are kind of some of the things. And thank you for bringing it out because you're right. There are people I often wonder when I watch like Stephen Colbert. And you've got to know you've got some writer, somebody who's back there writing this, but they can't deliver it the way Stephen does. So that's a person who knows what their lane is, but it makes me wonder, would Stephen really be as funny if he were trying to come up with his own material? And probably,
I mean, is he watching this? Because my answer is going to depend on.
Yeah. Well,
for sure, Stephen.
Absolutely. Okay, and they're very different. Trevor Noah versus when you look at Stephen Colbert. So it just depends. But hearing you talk about the different roles that people have, a writer, someone who would just deliver, right? People who they're a presenter. It just rolls off their tongue.
Yeah.
That I think that definitely is an art. And if you're able to, to capture that and to really build on it, that really and truly is a special gift. That's a special gift. But look, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, I'm going to ask you, I want to talk about, how did you get into working with companies and using comedy as that springboard? Because I'm certain inquiring minds want to know.
Awesome.
Absolutely. Right. So don't go anywhere, you guys. Thank you so much for hanging in here. We'll be right back.
Put the keys down, Kevin.
But I'm going to drive home.
There are several warning signs present that you shouldn't be driving.
My text to emoji ratio has gotten a little out of hand.
A little?
Yep, I'm definitely going to call a ride home.
You told me not to talk to strangers. You told me not to cross the street without looking both ways.
You told me not to touch the stove.
You told me not to do drugs.
You told me not to drink and drive.
You gave me so many messages about how to stay safe. Why didn't you keep me safe by properly storing your gun?
All right, if you guys are just tuning in, we have been having some laughs with my guest, comedian Mr. Chris Tabish of Comediology. But at the same time, Chris is educating us as it relates to just that entire, that's a whole nother sphere that, Chris, I'm not quite certain if I could step off into comedy. That's a different world. But definitely shared a lot of great points. And before we went to break, one of the questions that I asked was, how did you get into working with companies using comedy as that springboard? Tell us about that.
Yeah, I think it's funny, Gloria. So I wasn't. So I worked in Silicon Valley for about the past 20 years. It was a really difficult transition. So I always worked with companies. I wrote the book Comediology, and Comediology it's light, it's fun, it's has a lot of what I'm talking about incorporated into it. I put it out there to say, hey, if you guys want to read this book, my marketing department did. Sorry, I'm big time. No, I literally posted it, and I had companies asking me, hey, we would love to laugh, we would love to learn some lessons, and I have not pushed it in terms of I haven't used it as a springboard in terms of really getting out there to say, knocking down doors. I think companies really need to laugh. Oh my gosh, especially now, especially with Zoom. I think that people are really open to learning and also laughing. And the funny thing is, I think when we are laughing, it's when it gets past that skeptical part of our brain and we can actually absorb it. I think it's if we could encapsulate. And the funny thing is, just a tangent for a little bit, I think the advertising industry is aware of this. They get it. They get that if you're laughing, you're going to like their products, remember their products, because it gets past that skeptical part of our brain. I think the same thing in corporate America is, yes, we want a little bit of fun, we want to learn. And if you can incorporate them both, what a bargain, because they just go hand in hand. I think it's been a pull, if you will, because I think companies are just really down for some stress relief and some fun.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it is so needed when you've got difficult messages to deliver.
Yeah.
You can deliver it in such a way that you can take the sting out of it. It's still real, it's still happening, but you've got some people who don't know how to do that. They just get up there and lower the hammer and boom, that's it, right? And so let's look at it and let's flip the switch, and how can we deliver this message, even though it's not the most positive, but how can we place it in a different light? And that's where I think what it is that you and your team does, and you bring that in. And that's still a special gift. I think that's really and truly a very, very special gift one has to have.
Well, I think, Gloria, I think you're spot on. And I think one of the things that you talk about, authenticity, I think that it is, if looking at what we talked about children earlier, children just say what's on their mind, right? It's, I come home and my son's like, hey, what happens if you put the car keys down the toilet? I'm like, why? And he's like, never mind. He's just, this is what's on his mind. And likewise in comedy, we love that. We love people observing and speaking the truth. And it's the same thing in business. It's like when you talk about just being authentic, just talking about, wow, that guy has a big white stripe underneath his armpit. It's observing and speaking the truth. And the funny thing is, that's funny. If somebody wants to learn how to be funny, that's it. Removing that editor, removing that filter that says you need to say what corporate America tells you you're supposed to say. Super awkward. No one gets it. But if you're just real with it, it moves mountains. It connects people. And even if you're not necessarily aligned with it, like, listen, guys, I don't necessarily agree with this message, but we're working for this company. They're taking care of this, and this is the way it needs to be. Sometimes that is the message. And it's true, and it's real, and it's authentic.
Yeah, absolutely. And listening to you, just what you said, it just conjured up for me. There are two things. One is a commercial, and I laugh every time I see it. It's weird.
And I'm a conjurer, by the way. That's my magic.
Okay, thank you for conjuring that up. And the two people, and I guess the big monkey muck walks up, and he's dipping into the chip and the salsa, and he drips salsa on his shirt. And they're both, telepathically telling one another, you tell him, I'm not going to tell him, you tell him, you tell him. And then he turns around and he says, you got some lipstick, on your teeth. And they're thinking, well, doggone it, I should have just told you, you just dropped, salsa all down the front of your shirt. Or the person who has a salad green in their tooth, right? And people don't want to tell them. And it's like, you know what? That's the real thing. So you let a person walk around all day long with this green, leaf in their tooth.
Friends tell friends.
And that's literally what ends up happening. So people have to just be able to be authentic and still in such a way deliver the message. And that is what I think that you have been able to craft and pull together, is a message, but in such a way that people can still laugh and yet you get your message across. And so that's it, for me, I think that says that's a skill that I think developed over time, that you've really developed. You already had it, but apparently totally developed it, which leads me into you coming up with material. You talked about your kids, but also, do you observe situations and create comedy, or is it something you just create in your head? Because you talk about your kids, but I know there's other stuff too that Chris Tabish has going on in that head up there.
Yeah, it definitely is observational about my kids. It's also, and people ask, how can I be funny? How can I? And if you think about how you are unique in this world,
Right.
So because there is, so for example, I wear hearing aids. They're not the type that you can, like, they will go way in my ear, right? That's unique about me. I used to wear the kind that you can see, but the problem is that when you do, people talk to you like you're trapped in a fishbowl.
Right.
We see you in there.
Right. Can you hear me?
Yeah. They're like, do you want tomato on your sandwich? I'm like, what? It's the one time I'm wearing hearing aids. I can hear you. And why would I want a potato on my sandwich? But it's if it's something that's unique about you and it's funny, and also so let's be real, right? Wearing hearing aids for me, there's a little bit of shame to it, right?
Yeah.
And when you're going into that area, and this is, by the way, a unique trigger point, whether it be in corporate America, whether it be in comedy, if you're feeling a little bit of shame, if you just get it out there.
Right.
You get it out there, talk about it. It's a gift. And there's so much humor associated with it. When people are laughing with you, in my experience, and this is outside of me, but when I see people talking about what has societally shamed them, it not only makes me laugh, but I have oodles of respect for that person.
Yeah, absolutely. And when again, it comes back to something that was said earlier, being able to laugh at yourself. Right. And when you do that, I just think it puts you on a totally different level. And that's really, really important. So, but thank you for sharing that with me. Can you hear me now? And
it's when the really hard part is when people start using sign language, but when they don't know sign language.
Yeah, that's terrible. Okay, so look, we're going to take a really quick break. And when we come back, I want you to just talk about it from the stand-up comedy piece of it, how you deal with hecklers, and have you ever just bombed? Have you just ever died on stage? So you guys, you're tuned in to You Didn't Get the Memo with my awesome guest, Mr. Chris Tabish, and we're going to be right back. Don't go anywhere.
Thank you for watching the You Didn't Get the Memo show with your inspirational host, Gloria Bailey Ray. It's your contributions that make this happen. To become a sponsor, send an email to youdidn'tgetthememo@gmail. That's the letter U, didn't get the memo. If you're not in a space to be a sponsor, but you like what you hear, we simply ask that you support what you like by making a contribution to the show. There are 3 ways to make an online donation. Visit paypal.me/Gloria Bailey Ray or Cash App or Venmo, Gloria Bailey Ray. Give what you can. Your support is appreciated.
All right. Thank you guys so much for hanging in here with me, with my guest, Mr. Chris Tabish. And we're just talking about really life is full of laughs. It's all about how you look at it and, what you choose to do with it. So, with that being said, before we went to break, one of the questions that I actually posed to my guest, Chris, was how do you deal with hecklers?
Oh, I've not none.
Okay.
No, I think, yeah, I've definitely had hecklers. I think that in my experience, there are definitely certain strategies that you can put in, and it's the same way in on stage or in corporate America. If you can literally just like shift your body a little bit, that's version 1.0. That's the clean version. If it's not going to work, it's almost like anything else, Gloria. In my experience, it's like if you have a friend or if you have somebody that is just not going to drop it until they get their word in. I know have friends like this. Everybody have friends like this, and they're all named Tammy. No, just kidding, Tammy. I love you. Anyway, but the point is, just to let them speak, just to get it out on the table. I literally just like walk over there, like, what do you want to say? And
Right.
chances are they're just like, nothing. but sometimes they do. And then it's just going with the flow. I think so many times, you asked, have you died on stage? Yes.
Right.
Many. This is the spirit of Chris Tabish you're actually talking to. No, I've died on stage multiple times. And typically when I do, it's because I'm so trying to get all my material across or get to a punchline instead of being in the room. And so being able to shift and listen and interact. And if people aren't really feeling what you're doing, you got to change. You've got to be in the room, talk to people, get their interaction. Hey, this is welcome to awkward night at the comedy club. Like calling a spade, calling what truth is out there will help you come back. It might not necessarily do it every time, but if there's anything to get you back in my experience, it's coming back to truth. What's real?
Right. Yeah, for sure. So, what determines the amount of stage time you get when you're performing? Because I've actually gone to a number of comedy clubs, and there are some people who may be on for 5 minutes, and then other people who are on for like 15 or 20 minutes, and other people who've actually used their time and the other person coming behind them, their time as well. So, what determines the amount of time that you get on stage when you're performing?
The amount of stage time is determined on by how long you're up on stage. No, weird. Okay, sorry. I'm just gonna know myself. I'm annoying, Gloria. Just smack me, kick me under the table. No, it's
I happen to be tracking and following you, okay? So
typically the way that it works is, and this is hand in hand. When you are a new comic, you only want 3 minutes. 3 minutes seems like an eternity. You don't want to be up there for 3 minutes. Nobody else wants you up there for longer than 3 minutes because there's a lot of discomfort. And so you sort of gain time the more that you can go. It takes a lot. For example, first, if you're a new beginner, you get 3 minutes, and it takes a while to get a 3-minute set that's a tight set. Then it's a 7-minute, and then you do 2 7-minutes, and then, wow, I can get 14 minutes on stage. And so it builds up sort of in these concentric circles to the point where you feel comfortable being up there 45 minutes with a microphone, but definitely takes time. And it takes time to collect that much material, feeling the ability to be comfortable. Some people are quicker at it than others, but yeah, it's just that conglomerate. And jokes come back to you. You write something and you're like, it's not that good. And then 2 years later, you're like, wait a minute, I can add on this to this. And it ends up being magical.
Yeah, 3 minutes though. I'm thinking 3 minutes. That doesn't seem like an inordinate amount of time. Like seem like the time goes through. But I guess if you're the person that's having to deliver this message, then it would be. But that's good to know. 3 minutes, 7 minutes, 14 minutes, and
Yeah.
that's a lot. That's a lot of time.
Well, and seeing some of the horror stories, I'll reenact one. The first time, I was up on stage, the lights are bright. You're in front of the microphone. You're sitting there in front of, 20, 30 people. And you're like, hey, how much time I got left? They're like, all of it. Okay. What about now? Yeah, you still. So it's unnerving. It's not the way that you performed in front of the mirror. Very different. People are looking at you. If you're not used to really connecting with people, and you don't, this is going to sound weird, but let your soul shine in front of people, connecting with people, not looking away from eye contact, but really engaging with it. It could be really daunting, but once you do engage, it's really a beautiful connection. It is so much fun.
Yeah, awesome. So are there any topics, though, that a stand-up comedian should avoid? Or should they just have free reign to joke about anything? And and I ask you that question because that's a really slippery slope right there, depending on who the comedian is, because some people can get away with certain things and not other people. So the original question was, are there any topics, in your opinion, that a stand-up comedian should avoid?
Yeah, and thanks for that trick question before we go, Gloria. I appreciate it. I would say as a white male, everything is open to me. No, I'm joking.
Okay. A white male from Utah.
Yeah, exactly. Smorgasbord, all you can eat. You go at it, Chris.
Okay.
No, I think it really is, you have to know your audience, and even things that, getting back to the hearing, I'll give you an example. So this actually happened to me. And if I'm in San Jose, I'll tell you a joke that it will get completely different responses. So here's the joke. So I found out I'm losing my hearing, and I go to one of my best friends and I was like, I'm losing my hearing. And he goes, yeah, I knew that. And I said, well, how did you know that? Is it because I say what all the time? And he says, no, it's because you talk like this all the time. And I was like, yeah. And okay, so exactly. So it's we're gonna edit through that, right? So I'm a hearing impaired person, right? I'm kind of making fun of myself. In certain crowds, that will get a big laugh. In certain crowds, people will be offended. And I'm just telling you the way it actually. Shame on my friend for telling that joke. This was no, but yeah, it is. It's different audience and kind of knowing your audience. It really is.
Yeah. So prior to you going on stage, do you have an opportunity to survey the audience? Meaning, I have been especially in San Francisco, I've been a couple of comedy clubs where the actual comedian is just out like milling around talking to people. Hey, how you guys doing? It's your first time here. Almost like they are the manager of the club, right? And it turns out that they're actually the person that's going to be performing. So do you get out and get a feel for people who are there?
Definitely, in as much as I can. I used to show up when I was a beginner, just show up and like, I'm going to communicate these jokes. But actually getting to know people and being present with people is your best indicator. Hints that we'll give you before you go to the club. What geography are you in? San Francisco, like I said, is very different from San Jose, is very different from Utah. What people's preferences are, et cetera. And then inviting people to your own show, having your crew of people that you're comfortable with. It's no wonder that famous comedians, when they go there, they just show up and they like, and they get laughs. Because it's their people, that they know what to expect from that comedian. And it's so much easier to resonate with them. I think there's a misnomer for new comedians to get up there and they think, hey, why am I not the funniest with this complete room of strangers? Right. It makes such a difference to have those people on your side, to know those people, to be able to connect with them, that you've had that connection previously.
Right. Thank you for saying that, because that answered a question. I always thought it was odd. A guy walking around and he's asking questions, and then the people that are heckling him, but it was his crew. So they knew, because he had a whole lot of jokes about his wife. And I'm sitting there thinking, man, if I were your wife, dude, at this point, I'd be throwing some eggs at you. Yeah. So,
and get that white stuff off your armpits.
Right. Absolutely. Clean those arms for sure. So my question for you, Chris, is, do you crack jokes in real life, or are you actually serious? Because you talked about they're different people, and it's really interesting. I don't think that I'm funny. But sometimes if you ask my kids, they be like, man, let me tell you about my mom. And I'd be like, dude, you didn't just bust me out like that, right? But they thought it was funny. right? So, but I would say I'm probably more, very friendly, but on the more serious side. So, you know what? Are you one of those dudes that's just actually, you're real serious, but you can crack jokes?
Thanks for that optimistic appraisal, by the way. No, I think, Gloria, here's what I think of you. I think you're like a sing song, like you got this melodic sort of like the way that you speak, and it's truthful, right? And so that's levity. I think of comedy in terms of energy. You bring that energy up because it's got some movement to it. It's truth, so it's got some levity to it. I think of myself as a truth teller, but in a funny way, like calling a spade, but just let's have a laugh at it. And it's more for me as a catalyst to connect with people. If we can get laughing together, and I mean, those are the best times of my life. So yes, I'm always trying. Now I have sometimes I do actually, a lot of this analysis that I've talked about, I'm kind of a geek and I like to nerd out on that. And I tend to get like more serious in analyzing, but oh my gosh, the best times I love to connect with people laughing.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you for that. And, the checks in the mail for all these wonderful things that you're saying about me.
I'm just dancing, Gloria, digging the beat.
That's right. So just moving with it, right? So let me just ask you this. What's the best thing about what it is that you do? And on the flip side, what's the worst thing?
Yeah. The best thing is, I'd say me. No, I think the best thing is the best thing that I do, Gloria, just to make sure I understand your question. That self-appraised.
Yeah, as it relates to just what it is that you do as a comedian, what's the best thing about what it is that you do? But like with anything, there's also a flip side too. And I used the term worse, but maybe not the most pleasant thing as it relates to being a comedian. Because here's where I'm thinking, here's where I'm going. You're in the car, you're on the road a lot, and of course I know that you have your own private plane, so you just be able to fly wherever, so but just being gone away from the family. So when I think about some of the not so pleasant things that maybe you may tend to miss out on, what may be some of those? But then what's the best thing? When somebody can come up and say, dude, you encapsulated what I was feeling about my boss, who's really a butthole, and thank you for putting it in that way. And I will always have that vision of how you said it to them. So there are the positives, and there's also pros and cons. Maybe that's right.
Yeah.
What's and the cons about what it is that you do as a comedian?
I think that the best thing that comes out of being a comedian, whether it be comedy or comediology, is people recognizing that joy within themselves as not only joy for what it is, but truth, right? And that truth is, it can really transform if we let it, if we really embrace that. And seeing that, people have come up to me and like, oh my gosh, I'm actually a performer. And I've been trying to be a writer. I've been trying to compete with all these writers instead of getting out on stage. Seeing that, people embracing that, and then having them experience the joy and use that in their life. I think that's by far the greatest thing, and just connecting with people. I think the downside is when you're talking about being a comedian and bringing joy, and then all of a sudden I'm, in a yelling match with my son. I'm like, no, this needs to be, you need to be in bed by 10 o'clock. And then, tempers flare, and I'm like, and I'm supposed to be telling people, like helping people find joy, and it's ridiculous. And I have to laugh at myself. But that's the down. You're looking at yourself like, okay, come on, this is being ridiculous. So yeah, it really is. If you're an advocate of that, to really use it in your life, and sometimes it's challenging. And yeah,
that makes sense. So you have a book, comedian.
Yes,
how can people get the book?
So I'm actually have so this is Comediology, which is the first book that talks about comedy in business. This is a children's book. If you want to start the kids laughing, it's called No Laughing. And finally, this is one called Why Are We Here? So this is basically a book of openers. So if you want to go to a meeting, lift it up, and so all of these are on Comediology.com. .com.
Yeah, and there it is right there. So you guys can check it out. So, Chris, what is it that you want people who are watching the show today to take away from us being able to sit here and have a dialogue and some good laughs in between? What is it that you want people to take away from watching the show today?
I think these white stains from my I think if I to take away is that comedy. To come to the show, first off, would love to see you guys. It's on December 19th, 7 p.m. at Cobb's. Would love to see you guys there. And also, if they could take away that comedy is that consistent reminder in this hard world we're going through. It's that consistent reminder to get out of our brain, our left analytical brain, and just into our body, and to help us enjoy, to help us live life with a little more levity and a little more joy.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you, Chris. Look, don't you go anywhere. Chris, I'm going to be right back with you. I want to say to my viewers, first of all, I want to thank you guys as always for tuning in, both you who are nationally and internationally. I can't say it enough. I just can't thank you enough. I'm grateful and I'm humbled that you guys tune in every week to the show. And look, if somebody is not tuning in and they don't know about You Didn't Get the Memo, make sure that you clue them in and tell them that they need to be tuned in to the You Didn't Get the Memo show, because we're always bringing it and we have something for everybody. I want to also thank all of you who are my sponsors. The show today, again, has been brought to you by Crispy. And there is sponsorship opportunities. You can go to my website, youdidn'tgetthememo.com, and check it out. I want you to be sure and follow me on all of my social media platforms. I'm pretty much on everything except for, as Chris reminded me, MySpace. And mark your calendars for every Tuesday at 5 p.m. for another great show. Guys, the bottom line is simply this. If you didn't take anything away from today's show, then it's really and truly you who didn't get the memo. Remember this, the quality of your life is determined by the decisions that you made. I'm your host, Gloria Bailey Ray. As always, I am so excited that you decided to join me. Until this time next week, I want you to be safe and to remember to pay it forward. I'm your host, Gloria Bailey Ray. We're out.